The breath is always the way to calm down the body to get back into the present moment. So, generally speaking, in through the nose, long, slow exhales out of the mouth or out of the nose. So, elongating the exhale will actually get you back into that autonomic rest and digest state of being so that you can start to think about the next steps and about the next course of action.
Hey, soul family. Welcome to the Alive and Awake podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kay, and I have spent the last 20 years teaching people how to work with their wounds and overcome their greatest fears so they can learn how to thrive in a world where they were only taught to conform. Each week, we will dive deep into the practical, the spiritual, and the mystical so I can teach you how to do the inner work to know yourself, trust yourself, and eventually love yourself enough to create a world where you feel fully alive, awake, and free. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode. Ready? Let's dive in.
Welcome to another episode, everyone. Today, I get to dive in deep and teach you what the concept means of how your triggers are your teachers. I know that this is a phrase that is thrown out there a lot, and some people it rubs the wrong way, but I want to really debunk exactly what's going on and why that is such a popular catchphrase going out right now, especially when we are being more informed about trauma, knowing how our bodies are our navigation system for what's unresolved in our psyche, and really how to allow whatever's coming up in you to teach you the inner work that your soul is calling you to do so that you can eventually get to a place where you actually feel at peace with yourself and you're less judgmental and you can be more playful instead of so serious all the time and in a constant state of stress. So, let's dive in. All right. So, what exactly is a trigger? Now, this is a very, like I said, popular word that is going around, but what it really means is it's a sensitivity within you. Right, because the issues that you have are stored in the tissues of your body. There's an amazing book out there by Bessel van der Kolk called Body Keeps the Score, and it really shows you how your cells in your body have an inner memory system that absorbs the energy and the sensations and things that are going on around you on a neurological level that we then are left to sort out on a psychological level. So, all the things that we've experienced in this life since the day that we're born and from past lives that we've been in still are stored in our soma, which is just another fancy word for body. So when something rises up to the surface and there's a sensitivity in you, it will get pushed at, right? It's a cut that never gets to be fully healed. It's like throwing salt on a wound. And so when you're triggered, it is how whatever's going on outside of you is having an impact on what is unresolved inside of you. Every single person in the world and on the planet has it. I don't care who you are, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, or be in denial, that's fine. That's your choice. But just know that if you're having an emotional reaction, then generally you're probably triggered about something. And what that is, it's up to you to figure out because it's a very personal journey to do that work. And what we need to understand is that the trigger doesn't look like an intense emotional reaction often outwardly. It also can look like imploding inwardly. So if something happens in your external world and you notice that you're going into a place where you're numbing, you're detaching, you're avoiding, you're deflecting, you're distracting, you're criticizing yourself inside, you're overly judgmental about yourself inside, this is a sign that you are having, you're being triggered. And the way that you are actually handling that is by imploding, which I often do too. But because I have a lot of warrior spirit and I have a lot of fire in me and a lot of like anger, then the way I know that I'm generally triggered is I also explode, where I essentially like will lose it. It's like an inner explosion. And the way that we know that we're being triggered is the intense emotional reaction that you're having to the situation is way more extreme than it needs to be. And you know that it's like, the intense reaction doesn't warrant the situation at hand. That's always a sign that something is coming up in you that your inner spirit and your inner soul wants you to pay attention to, right? Because the universe and source, or your higher self that is in communication with source constantly in your body, will arrange circumstances in the external world to show you where you're still not free, or where you're still getting hooked into old patterns that are unresolved emotional wounds. Because the ultimate goal for our higher self in this human form, in this body, is to be at peace with yourself, to accept yourself, to not judge yourself, and to feel really free, to feel light, to feel playful, to feel fun, to be in love and in joy with this human experience. So if there's dense emotional energy that is still blocking you from being able to do that, then universe and source loves you so much that it arranges circumstances for you to play out these wounds with, so that you can heal, ultimately alchemize it, and step into your power and into the higher version of yourself. So 90% of the time, what triggers us is a relationship. Yes, certain things can be triggered as far as like driving in traffic and certain things like that, but it's still another human being. It's still a situation. It's still a relationship. And if the reaction that you're having, again, is way more intense than it needs to be, then you know that your higher self is asking you to do some deeper work. So I'm going to throw myself under the bus. And this is exactly why I'm talking about this week, because I know that this is my next phase of evolution. One of my triggers is I cannot stand to be late. It wrenches me like no other. And I've always known this about myself, because trying to get my kid out of the house, trying to get myself out of the house, like all this, it comes with this pressure. And if you're a parent, if you're in a relationship, if you're an employee, like this thing about time for me specifically is very, very sensitive. It's not everybody's wound, but it certainly is mine. So what's been happening this week, and of course, like there's 4 planets in retrograde and all this crap is happening, and we're all in this like energetic, shift on the planet right now, is things feel really, really heavy and they feel dense. And what will happen is that these things will start to come up in us because the light wants to be poured into that area, and it can't if that dense energy is still stored in your body. And what the universe has been arranging for me to look at full force is this concept of time. I have noticed a pattern this week coming up where I'm trying to get my son out of the house, or I'm trying to get us somewhere, and this like overwhelm starts to take over my body. And I'm looking at the time and I'm like, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. We're going to be late. And so I'm starting to rush him and I'm starting to get all agitated. And then the blow up happens, right? Prime example of this was yesterday. I was picking him up from day camp. They went on an all-day hike. It's something he absolutely loved to do. I had time to pick him up from camp, get him dressed for football, get him to football practice within 1 hour's time, right? The hike ran late, so I didn't get to pick him up until quarter after. Him and his friend are coming running out of camp. They're super excited, can't wait to tell me about their day. And I am like stone cold, pissed off, miserable that I got to get this kid home. I got to get him dressed. I got to get him to the football field by 6 o'clock, or shit's going to hit the fan in my brain, right? So all I'm thinking about is time. And I can't even enjoy that these kids are coming out and they're like wanting to tell me about my day. And all of a sudden, my son says to me, you know what, Mom, when we get home, I got to take a shower before football. And I was like, oh, hell no. We do not have time to take a shower before football. You can deal with it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like having this rant around like a shower. And I'm like, all right, calm the fuck down. I'm like, I'm going to breathe through this. I'm like, you know what, boys? Give me a minute. I am not in my right state of mind. I'm super pressured right now. I'm really agitated right now because I'm rushing. I'm trying to get to this place on time and I'm not going to make it. Just give me a second. So, because I know myself and I know how to do this work and I know how to shift my energy and I know how to change my focus, it's really simple for me. It happens very, very quickly. So, I just took some breaths. I was like, what is true? What is true is that, yeah, I may be late. What is true is that no one's going to die. What is true is that who gives a shit if I'm late? Because it's way more pleasurable for me to like let the day go smoothly than to try to keep myself in this zone that I know does not work for me. So lo and behold, he ended up taking a shower. We ended up getting to the park exactly at 6 o'clock, right exactly on time, and we weren't even late anyways. So I know that that's a trigger in me because the emotion was so intense and my heart was hard and my body was hard and all this stuff was coming up in me because I was having a reaction to something that was going on inside of me that was unresolved about my crap, which I'll tell you about in a second. But just to hone this in, I was like, all right, I identified it yesterday. Guess what happened this morning, right? Here we are trying to get ready. I have to take him to his dad's house. It's now 8:15 in the morning. I need to get him 25 minutes away to his dad's, drop him off so then I can get 25 minutes back to come to the office to go do work. And here I am, and I'm like, my son's name is Jace. I'm like, Jace, you got to brush your teeth. You got to pack your bag for dad's. You got to get your football stuff together. And I'm telling him what he needs to do. And yes, he's doing it. But as I'm also getting my stuff ready to get out of the house, I go and I check on him and he's in the bedroom. And guess what he's doing? He's counting his money in his piggy bank because that was his priority in that moment. His priority is not to get out of the house in time. His priority in that moment is to count the money in his piggy bank. And guess what happened? I lost my shit. I was like, what are you doing? We're not going to get there on time. And I'm like in my Medusa state of mind because I'm like so agitated and so pressured. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do to make this kid move faster. I'm like, I'm going to get in the truck. I'm going to let him do his thing. I know he's going to meet me in there. And as I'm in the truck, I am gripping the steering wheel and I am like this. And I am pissed. And I'm like having my little, temper tantrum of a younger part of me that wanted to come through in that moment. And as he gets in the truck and he's all scrambled, I'm trying to calm myself down. And he's like, okay, Mom, can we just be happy now? Can we move on? And I'm like, and I literally, I'm like, can I move on right now? Can I? I'm like, nope, not yet, buddy. Give me a minute. And what do kids do when we're trying to like calm ourselves down? They keep talking and they keep adding fuel to our already exploding fire inside. And so I was just like, you talking to me and asking me questions about when we can turn on the music and when you can have my phone and when we could do these things is not helping me calm down. And I'm sitting here laughing at myself as I'm saying this and I'm sharing it with the world because I can guarantee from the outside looking in, it's pretty hysterical, like this stupid reaction that I'm having, right? But lo and behold, I was able to do that because I know how to shift my energy. I know when I'm not in alignment with my higher self. And I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, this is my stuff. This isn't my kid's. He knows. So then I calm myself down. I take some breaths. I'm like, okay, buddy, listen. Here's the thing. I have a really big sensitivity with time and getting out of the house on time and being late. I said, it's not your fault. I know you're just a kid. You're doing the best you can. However, in the morning, what's going to happen from this point forward is before you turn on any television or any screens, you have to have all your stuff ready to walk out the door so that we don't deal with this crisis. It's something that I do during the school system. I've always done it, but for some reason, I let it go over the summer. That's just what we do as parents, whatever. That needs to be put back into practice. It's like, okay, Mom, no big deal. Can we listen to some music now? Yeah. Puts on my favorite song, MC Hammer, Can't Touch This. Start rapping, start singing all the words, start like being playful and having fun again, because that's the energy that I want to be in. But because I know that something was being triggered in me, and I know that this is a pattern that's been coming up over the last couple days this week, I also know that my higher self is wanting me to take a look at that, right? So I say this to you because it is that simple and not that simple, right? Because I'm so self-aware and I know myself really well, and I teach other people how to do that too. Like it's easy to shift in and out of it. But if something is coming up in you that's unconscious or that you're unaware of, it can feel really activating and it can feel really hard to shift back in to another energy that you choose to be in that moment, because not enough of the trauma or the pain in your body is cleared out. So today I want to talk about how to do that work so that when you notice that you're really activated and you can't get out of your head and you're spinning and like you keep getting pissed off or you keep getting irritated or you keep imploding on yourself and you keep self-sabotaging, this is the work that your soul is asking you to do. And I took some notes on it, so I'll probably shift back and forth. And mind you, the part of me that was triggered is not the part that actually would say that I took notes for this session. I would just try to appear perfect and I would try to appear normal and appear like I have it all together all the time and I can just rant this shit off the top of my head. But the truth is that I don't. I got to take notes on some things. And so I want to make sure that you guys get this material because it's really important, because there's a lot of people who are out there that are struggling and like need this life preserver to help save them in moments where they have these reactions and they feel like pieces of crap. Because the truth is that when you are triggered, also, this will help bring in some compassion for yourself. When you're in that state of mind or that fight or flight part is activated, it's actually your amygdala. And when your amygdala is activated, which is the survival part of your brain, you do not have connection with your higher level learning or your hippocampus, which is your higher level of consciousness where you can be in touch with reality and you can think about how to respond and you can process information. These two parts are disconnected in the brain when the trigger and the trauma is coming forward. Because let's be honest, when you are getting chased by a bear in the woods or something dangerous is happening and you need to survive, you don't need to think about what to do, right? You just react to the situation. That's exactly what the amygdala is for. And so when you're having a real-time response and you're responding to a stressor or to a trigger or to a trauma that your brain is perceiving in the present moment, you don't have the ability to think about what's going on. So I tell people, when you're in a triggered state or when someone else you know is in a triggered state or having an emotional reaction, the last thing you can do is reason with them, because their logical brain is not intact, right? So knowing that is half the battle. It's so important to understand that intense emotion is a reaction coming out, and you're not in control of that all of the time because you're reacting to or you're responding from a survival state. And those no, there's actually four now. Let me correct myself. What we know is fight, flight, or freeze, right? So flight, run away from it, avoid it, get away from it as fast as you can. Freeze, submit, like, play dead, essentially, like go into a submissive response until the chaos stops, or until you're safe. Or fight, attack. Like I have a ton of fight energy in me. I'm very, very much like that. However, in my younger self, when I was a child, I would obviously freeze. Because children don't necessarily fight back. Some do, but that's for a whole nother podcast. And so the fourth reaction that we now know of is called fawning. And fawning is actually molding yourself into the situation to be whatever anybody needs you to be in order to get through it and to survive. And this is how we'll talk about a part of me that fawned when I was younger and what was coming up for me when I was triggered. But it's a very adaptive coping mechanism that the brain uses in order to get you through the situation. The problem is that we stay with those reactions and we don't even realize that that's a trauma response, and that's not really our true authentic self. So to recap, when you're triggered, you do not have the ability to think. The only thing that gets you out of a triggered state or gets anybody else out of a triggered state is time, right? Time, learning how to shift your state of mind. So first, it is recognizing that you are triggered. For me, what that feels like is I become super hard. I become super angry. I have like fire burning in my body. And you can see it on my face as I'm talking about it right now. It's like very, very evident of when I am in that state. And it comes from years and years and years of past trauma and things like that. But that is my outward expression and how I know in my body that something's coming up inside of me that is reacting to a memory or a situation from the past. Other people might get really closed off and they might implode and they want to hide and they feel really, really scared. That tends not to be my default mode, but if that is yours, then that is also something to look at. And we can have many different modes. It's not just that one. Some people's default mode when they're triggered is anxiety. They have a lot of chatter in their head. They start to get really like a somatic response of feeling really like fearful, feeling really scared, feeling like they're anticipating something bad happening. That's also a trigger as well, because anxiety really is a conglomerate of a bunch of unprocessed emotions that is stored in the body that presents as this, anxious sensation. So once you know that you are in a triggered state, like I did, where I'm like gripping the steering wheel and I'm like ready to fight, I'm like, okay, this is one, recognizing and having the awareness that something's coming up in me that has nothing to do with my son getting out of the house on time or me being late for work, right? My capacity to handle that in this moment was, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to message my client. I'm going to tell her I'm going to be 5 minutes late. Not a big deal. And then I'm going to take some breaths, right? The breath is always the way to calm down the body to get back into the present moment. So generally speaking, in through the nose, long, slow exhales out of the mouth or out of the nose. So elongating the exhale will actually get you back into that autonomic rest and digest state of being so that you can start to think about the next steps and about the next course of action. For me, it was, I need to reconnect to my heart, right? When I'm in a triggered state, when I'm in a fearful state, when I'm in an angry state, I have no connection to my heart. I completely disconnect. I shut off. I get cold. And I'm like, all right, I love my son. I love my work. I love my life. Let me reconnect right now. And that's what I'm telling myself in my head as he's being silent and giving me my space. And then from there, I was like, all right, how do I shift the mood? How do I change the vibe? How do I get back into alignment with how I want to feel in this moment so I can restart my day and do the work on what was coming up in me later? So we always have to go back to it later. And what I discovered in processing through that this morning is that there's a lot there. And we have to be willing to go and take a look at it so that we can get to a place of peace within ourselves and we can understand ourselves on that level. And we can also explain to the other people around us that are affected by our wounds is what was coming up, so that they can understand that this is something that you're working on and that you're aware of, and that you're not just this person that has these reactions and doesn't take accountability for how you show up in the world. So the first thing is to sit down, whether that's with pen or paper or meditation, and say like, okay, what do I know, right? What I know is that when I'm late or I have the perception that I'm going to be late, something happens inside of me that takes me into a feeling of crisis. It feels like I am, crisis and control, right? So not only am I feeling like I'm in crisis, I'm feeling like I have to control my son. I have to be very rigid. I have to be very harsh in order to get him to do what I need him to do so that I get my needs met and I get to my destination on time. Whether that's his school, whether that's practice, whether that's work, it doesn't matter. It's always the issue with time. So that's what it is. Your trigger may not be time. It may be something that someone says to you, the way your partner looks at you, the language that your partner uses when they speak to you, the way that your child ignores you, like whatever it is, because our relationships are mirrors for us to do our inner work, we have to understand that that will keep happening until we choose to change the pattern, change the script, and do what needs to be done, right? So I was able to look at the fact like it feels like I'm in crisis. Okay, isn't that interesting? I feel like I'm in crisis when I'm going to be late. Well, what is that about? Right. So then I was able to do a little bit more work and say, oh, okay. This is actually the part of me that was developed at a younger age that has what's called unrelenting standards. So, unrelenting standards are like you have a standard for yourself that's super, super high. And like there's no gray area and no room for mistakes. And so, because I hold myself at such a high standard to be perfect in other people's eyes, which is a manager part that was created in me in order to survive the situations I was in, which we'll talk about in a second, um, that part comes in and like has such an unrelenting standard for how you appear to others in the world and how you feel about yourself, right? So she rides on the back of my perfectionist as well. And I was like, okay, so it's my unrelenting standards part that wants to be perfect or wants to be perceived as perfect to other people. And if I walk in late, I don't know how they're going to think of me. I don't know how they're going to perceive me. I don't know if they're going to judge me, all of this stuff, right? I was like, okay, well, at what age, because I know how to do internal family systems work and work with these parts of myself, at what age did this part of me develop? And I was like, okay, this is a part of me that developed in middle school. Well, what was going on in middle school? What was going on in middle school is that I was super embarrassed about how my home looked. There were cockroaches in my cupboard. I never had a clean house. Sometimes the house would be so destroyed by the domestic situation that was going on between my mom and her boyfriend at the time that I would come home and there would be dirt on the floor and broken mirrors. Like my life was chaotic. And because I didn't want anybody in school or in my personal life to know how chaotic my life was, my psyche brilliantly developed this part of me that was like, okay, I'm going to hide everything that's going on in reality. And I'm going to make it look like I am normal and that I have a normal family and like I fit in to the outside world. So I decided, not literally made the decision, but my higher self, my psyche, my soul decided that in order to adapt and to cope, then she can start to control what she can control, which is how people perceive her. So I became the best student. I was never late. I did all my homework. I made sure all my teachers liked me. I made sure all the people in school liked me. Some of them didn't. I couldn't do anything about that, but it also felt like a crisis. And I was so adamant that I was going to be like everybody else, that this part of me developed to appear perfect and normal and set these standards for myself that were super unrealistic and that are obviously in real life really hard to maintain and achieve. And so I was like, oh, okay. So that's the part of me that's getting triggered with time. And that's the part that's coming out when I feel like my son is threatening my ability to feel and appear normal and look normal to the outside world. And because our children literally are little mirrors for us to do this work with. And all of our partners are too, but sometimes it's an adult partner because they don't always take accountability and they don't always have the same language as you to be able to talk about this stuff and to be able to hold space for it, so you feel like you're alone or you feel like it's you, which is somewhat of an unhealthy dynamic, but that's often what we're used to. So we do the work on our own, or we think it's actually our partner that's doing it to us because they won't change and we're trying to control them and we're trying to change them so that we can feel regulated. And that actually is never the answer, right? We start to feel regulated when we actually do the work to change what's coming up in us and then adjust to the circumstance so that we're more at peace. You know, most times, like the outer world isn't going to change. It's up to you to change yourself. So then when I was able to identify the part of me that was coming up, I was like, okay, so then what really, step two, like what really is the work here, right? And then I started to think about, oh, this isn't only something from this life that I struggle with. And I was able to discover and uncover that in past lives, I also was like a servant. I was a slave. I was sold into marriage where I would get raped or beaten if I didn't get things done on time or things weren't done right. And so the resonance in the cellular memory is still there from past life trauma when I didn't have a choice and I would get abused if I didn't do things correctly. And then there's also another piece in my Akasha from a past life when I was a slave in a lifetime in Egypt. I was a man, I was very, very skinny, and my job was to lay bricks. And if I didn't lay enough bricks or meet that quota for that day, then I would get killed. So I was living in constant crisis to get things done and in order to stay alive, right? So having all of that awareness and that memory and how that does come forward is really helpful information, because then I'm like, oh, what really is going on here is that there's still cellular memory, there's still resonance of that in my body from when it was life or death. And so when I feel like I'm going to be late in this life and this time and space, it feels like life or death to me. It feels like a crisis. And it feels like if I don't control it and make it better, then something bad's going to happen. But logically, I know that's not true. So then when I had all this awareness of like why that's coming up, what it is, what the feeling is, then I can actually do the deeper work to meet myself with compassion. I went into meditation and I did some breath work, like deep, really big, deep breaths. And I was like feeling into how I felt when I was in middle school. And I was essentially like embarrassed about the life that I had and how incredible it was that I was able to adapt and try to fit in and have compassion for myself. But there's also like a lot of grief that comes with growing up in a home that's unpredictable, chaotic, unstable. And, so the way that I've adapted to that is to try to make everything so stable that it keeps me in a box, right? Where I know that my soul and part of my work and what I come here to do in this life is to be messy, is to be free, is to be authentic and imperfect and to make mistakes. And honestly, not give a shit if I make them because I'm a human being and there's no such thing as being perfect. But because I know that, I'm able to work with that. And you can too if you choose to face it, to free it, and to feel it, and to let whatever emotion is coming up in you as you uncover these memories and you uncover these parts of you that your soul is asking you to take a look at, because you honestly don't want to be hooked into that any longer, because your higher self wants you to be free. It wants you to look at this world with open curiosity and playfulness and fun, and not always feel so stressed and so serious all the time. And so it was really interesting of how all this stuff started to unravel when I really started to dig into what the heck is going on here and why is this hooking me so much this week? Because this is what I'm called to work on. This is what I'm called to pay attention to. Three. So the third thing is like what needs to be restored, released, or repaired in you based on the stuff that you've dealt with in your life. And this can be an ongoing thing, right? Like what needs to be restored is like, I need to know that I'm safe in my body at all times. And that because I am the creator of my life, I get to decide now as a grown adult sovereign woman how I want my reality to be and how I want to perceive my outer experience. The truth is, and which is the craziest thing about this, is I wasn't late in either circumstance. I arrived exactly on time in both circumstances, and I wasn't late when I told my client I was going to be. I was actually 5 minutes early. So I developed this whole damn crisis when I didn't even need to, right? So the truth is that it's okay to be messy. I'm always safe. No one's judging me. And even if they are judging me, then they're not for me. And that's more of a reflection of their own inner shit that they haven't done the work to resolve, that I'm only mirroring back to them, and that I can be free from all of this, right? I live in no time. And it's okay. It's not perfect. Like, do you feel like how freeing that is? Like to let the weight of that go, like is so liberating for the nervous system. I mean, like, I get to decide how I feel about this in this situation, right? The only one that's judging me is myself because I have some resonance there that my body doesn't want me to hold on to. So, this is how your triggers can be your teachers. And you can use whatever's happening in your outer reality that's causing an emotional reaction in you as a call to do some inner self exploration. And then learn to meet yourself with true compassion. And if there's emotion there, don't shut that shit down. Let yourself feel it, right? Like you are an emotional being. And women are master creators and they're so in touch with their intuition. But if you can't feel the things that are coming up in your body, you actually cut off your communication and your connection to source. So I fully know and I'm fully aware of and I completely trust that as this continues to be worked through me and as I notice it coming up, and it's going to keep coming up in present time because that's the work and that's just how life is. I always have the opportunity to make a new choice now. Am I going to let this feel like a crisis or am I going to stay calm? Am I going to take a couple breaths and am I going to be like, you know what, Alicia? No one dies in this life. It's okay, right? Being on time all the time is not the be all or end all. It is not worth robbing me of my peace anymore. I don't give a shit if I'm late. My peace is more important than whatever anybody thinks about me being on time and whatever I think about myself about being attached to some goddamn clock that I know is just an illusion anyways. All right, rant over. So, this is the work that I love to do, by the way. This is the stuff that I get to teach people when they are working with me one-on-one or they follow me on social media or subscribe to my newsletter. Like this is the stuff that I love to teach. All right, so to sum up or to recap, when you notice that you're having an emotional reaction that is more intense than the situation at hand, it is always a sign to do your work and that spirit is doing a work in you for you to change, not for you to change anything that's going on in the external world. However, there may need to be boundaries that are set there. That's a topic for another conversation. But generally, if it's happening and it's happening on repeat, it's you being called to do your inner work. All right, so what is the trigger? Name it. When this happens, this is what happens in my body. I notice these thoughts that are coming in my brain. Okay, then what is the reaction? How does it feel somatically? And what is the sensation and the emotion that is coming up in you that your body wants you to pay attention to? And what part of you or what younger part of yourself is needing your attention right now in order to transmute it, transform it, integrate it, alchemize it so that it doesn't keep getting hooked by the same thing or the same person? And how can you bring more love into the situation? Not like, yes, love for the person, understanding, but also for yourself, right? This can only be alchemized and transmuted if you can really get to the place where you are having a lot of compassion for one, what you've been through, how you brilliantly adapted and overcame the things that you've overcame in your life, and giving yourself some grace for not having all the answers and not having it all figured out all the time. This part of you needs your love and it needs the support of you as the adult woman that you are to be able to go in and be like, yeah, I must have been in a lot of pain in order for this to be coming up in me. The last part is what needs to be repaired, right? So, and what is my next course of action? So for me, it was having the conversation with my son around, hey, buddy, I know I've been super hard on you this week. I've been really stressed out and pressured to get out of the house on time. What I need from you, like I said, is to not watch the video games and do the things that you're doing on the TV unless you're ready to walk out of the house. That will help me calm things down so I know I can get myself ready because you're already ready. Deal? I'm also really sorry about having the emotional reaction that I had. Some old stuff from my past was being triggered. That's not your fault. You did not deserve to get yelled at. That's my stuff. And I'm going to work on it for both of us. So, in this day and age, it's also so important for us to take that accountability and take ownership of our stuff so that our loved ones don't have to develop their own stories about what's going on, right? Like he could easily be like, oh, my mom, I'm unlovable or I'm a bad kid, if I didn't do that deeper work to repair that with him. So it is also about the repair with other people, but also with yourself, and really trying to make a commitment and visualizing it and seeing in your mind's eye how you're going to respond and how you're going to react the next time this monster comes up inside of you. Because it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just dissipate because you're aware of it now. You actually have to do the work to change the pattern, because the pattern has been the reaction. For me, it's been 43 years of having this reaction, right? In many past lives, it's the reaction is already ingrained in the body. So you actually have to visualize and imagine, when this comes up in me again, this is what I'm going to do, and see myself actually doing that. So spending time in meditation of the reflection of seeing it go the way that your higher self would want it to go if this was not an issue in your body. So I really hope that this was a very, very helpful episode. Remember that your triggers are yours, and the things that are coming up in you are not anything to be ashamed of. We all have stuff, and we all have the right to work through it. If you've listened to any of my stuff, you know that in my past lives and in this lifetime, I was a shit show, right? Like I did not have everything all together. And the fact that I'm able to talk to you right now, and I'm able to be at peace with myself, and I'm able to be confident, and I'm able to be calm, and I'm able to laugh at myself now, is the product of me always radically working on the things that are coming up in me, because I want to know why I act the way I act. I want to know why I feel the way that I feel. And I'm not in the business of blaming anybody else on the outside for my crap anymore. And that's what we're really being called to do as the feminine, to create a new way and to pave a new way in this 5D level of consciousness and in this new earth reality that we are trying to pave. But we can't do that if we're not willing to take a look at ourselves and meet ourselves with the utmost love and compassion for your own unique journey. So, thank you for staying till the end of the episode. I hope that you found a ton of helpful information. I would love if you shared your story with me and told me what resonated with you, and to keep me inspired on creating more episodes like this, because I'm always looking for tools, for things to talk about that people want to hear. And I mean, if you can't tell, I kind of like throwing myself under the bus too. I don't necessarily always like talking about clients because of confidentiality, but I am fully willing and ready to let you all know what comes up in me, but just to also give you full permission to be your free, authentic self and to not have to have it all together all the time, right? We are on a human journey and we came here to do this together. So, if you resonate with this, please like, subscribe, share with somebody that you know. Go on my website, get my newsletter. I talk about this stuff and really important tips and tools every single month. I share what is coming up in the collective consciousness from Akashic Record predictions, and I really dive into helping you guys really get on your highest path for whatever your soul chose to create and to be a part of in this life form. So, thank you so much, everyone. I love each and every one of you, and I am so grateful to share this journey of life with all of you.